All right, so let's take a look at use case analysis. So use case analysis is one of several activities that that you do undertake towards the beginning of a project, right? Where you meet with your client and over several days, weeks, months, maybe, depending how large the project is. You're trying to agree on what it is that you're going to build, right? And then so once you've agreed on what you're going to build, that's hard enough. Then you have to agree on the time scale, right? What are we going to build first? Where are we going to start? So that's another huge undertaking on identifying what the priorities are, right? Oftentimes for clients, everything is important, right? So it's our responsibility to make them understand that there are limited resources, amount of folks, and amount of money and time, and if you only could do one thing, what would you do? Right? So trying to identify what is it to do first. So use case analysis is a portion where where we try to look at a product or try what is it that we're going to be building from the user's point of view, right? If somebody's going to be using this product, what are they trying to do? What are they trying to accomplish? Right? And from this analysis, we can glean quite a lot of information on how we're going to represent certain pieces of data, right? From the original requirements document and the use cases. Typically, we would then implement use cases into functional requirements, right? Things that actually implement what that actually fulfill, what is the user going to achieve through this? Okay, so use case analysis is again part of this first part of any project where we're trying to capture different types of requirements, and depending on the audience that we're talking to, we'll be retrieving different types of requirements. If you're talking to the business folks who are sponsoring this financially, typically they'll get a very high level vision scope, right, of wanting to increase sales, minimize returns, folks returning things, right, products. So they'll have a very, very broad, very abstract vision of what it is that they want to accomplish. Ideally, those would then trickle down into user requirements, right? How is it that you're going to achieve this, right? And ideally, you would interview the folks who are actually going to be using this, right? And they're going to have their own points of view, right? And they'll say, oh, the system is too slow, it's too complicated, hard to use. I can't actually accomplish what I need. I have to go here, this screen, and that other screen, and then submit that, and then come back here and look at this long list, and then do a search, and then once I find it, I have to navigate in there, remove. It's just a mess. So they'll have a lot of gripes, right? A lot of pain points that they want to fix, and we would perhaps sit with them and follow them for a couple of days and look at the forms that they fill out, all the screens that they fill out, and we are always asking, what are you trying to achieve, right? What is it? Not just what they're doing, right? Because they might be doing a whole lot of things, right? But what is it you're trying to achieve, right? And can we make it better for them, right? Not exactly what they're doing, but what are they trying to achieve? And they might describe the current system, and then we would perhaps provide an alternate goal or a different way for them to achieve the same exact goal. So the goals is what drives everything. Ideally, we would then try to convert these user requirements into functional requirements. As we're converting from these different types of layers, we go from a very, very high level business requirements to a little more concrete, right, from a user's point of view, and then even more concrete. We're actually going to have these three pages. It's going to have this button, these fields you're going to fill out, right, and so something concrete, right, maybe a wireframe for them to play around with, right, and from each layer of abstraction, very high level, medium, low level, we're always verifying from one layer to the previous layer. Is what the users are telling us does that match what the business wants to do, maybe the users have a completely different viewpoint of what is it that they hope the product would do, and it has nothing to do with what the business wants to achieve, right? So at each step we need to validate, right, that everybody's in agreement, right, that the business wants to achieve something, but it's not what the users want, right? So maybe the business is not really listening to their users, perhaps, right? And so it's our responsibility, right, to point that out, right? That wait a minute, this is what you want to do, this is where you want to put your money, but that's not what the users want, right? So at each step we need to do that same thing. Are all these great wireframes that the designers are building, they look amazing, they look spectacular, but wait a minute, this is not applying to, it's not achieving, it's not creating something that the user achieves their goal. So any of these wireframes would be written in the context of accomplishing certain goals from the user's point of view. There's going to be also all sorts of constraints that the business folks are going to tell us, that business hours between 9 and 5. Certain tellers are going to be closed after certain hours. We need to comply with certain laws, right? Of maybe local laws and regional laws and international law, and we need to. There are going to be a whole bunch of legal issues, and how do we interact with our financial sponsors, and how we, there's going to be lots of constraints, right, that we're going to need to document as business rules. Also, there's going to be all sorts of quality attributes that are very intangible, that are not perhaps represented in any screen or button or things that you could look at, right? But nevertheless, you have a feeling that it's easy to use. You have a feeling that it looks pleasing, right? It's kind of more intangible, or that it's snappy, it's quick, it's not sluggish. From the user's point of view, from the technical point of view, perhaps a developer might feel that everything's very well documented, that it can be easy to write tests against your code, and that it's reusable. I can just grab some libraries here and there, and I can really get going. All sorts of constraints, and this is depending on your methodology, whether you're doing waterfall or Scrum or Agile, right? That typically this has some understanding that things are not static, that it evolves over time, and requirements change, and we need to adapt to those kinds of changes. Also, part of this phase, we as developers and business analysts, and we know our own particular jargon on how we code our stuff, right? How we build our artifacts, right? But the business doesn't. The business doesn't know anything about any of this jargon. So don't bombard them with your jargon about data models, right? And classes and use cases. They don't know what that means. They don't know what a use case is, right? They don't know what requirements are. What do you mean a requirement? Right? They might go on with lots of requirements, but they don't use our jargon. So don't go and say, what are the requirements? They don't know what you're talking about, right? So they might know the things that they want to do, the things that they want to achieve, right? But they're not. We want to ask them, what is it you're trying to accomplish, right? And they'll tell you, I want to be able to do X, Y, and Z. Right? I need to do X, Y, and Z. So don't use jargon. Different artifacts that we're going to be identifying. Certainly, we need to understand what the boundaries of our project is, of the system that we're building, and at what level of granularity, or what level of abstraction do we want to model things, right? So for instance, if somebody mentioned the car as part of the interview and the requirements process, right? The question might beg, to what granularity do you want to model the car? Is it a license plate enough to model the car? Maybe it's enough, right? Depending on your domain. If it's a university, maybe the license plate, the model number, the model of the car, maybe make, year, and color. Maybe that's enough to model. But if you're in the car industry, maybe that's not enough, right? So depending on your industry, depending on domain, then the level of granularity of how much you want to model something changes, right? But it's still a car. It's just that it might mean different things in different contexts. So we need to understand the system. What is it? And what level of granularity are we modeling things, right? We need to the user classes that will represent the user and the profiles of the folks that are going to be using this. Actors is a more generic term that might capture either human actors or automated systems that might interact with the system. And the use cases are step-by-step descriptions on how these actors achieve a certain goal, and certainly test cases that validate these use cases. So use cases, right? They're going to describe the goal from the user's point of view, right? What are they trying to achieve? And they'll be, you'll represent them or you'll write them irrespective of what technology you'll end up using, irrespective of whether this is going to be a mobile application or a web page or a desktop application, irrespective, right, of what the end deployment, right, you'll try to capture some in a very generic term. So, like for instance, you would not be as specific as saying you click on OK. That assumes that this is perhaps a web page, right? And maybe there's a button or a link or hyperlink. So that's already committing to a particular technology, yes? Instead, you'll leave it at a very high level. You submit a page, or well, not a page, right? You submit the information, right? Again, not committing to a particular framework. You're going to leave that decision to the functional requirements. In the functional requirements, we'll make some decisions, right? And you leave it up to the designers to decide whether, for this goal or for this particular use case, we're going to use one page, or maybe we'll use maybe 3 or 4 pages. Yes, right? So the use case does not dictate, right, how this is going to look like, how it's going to be laid out, or that's going to be left to later phases of the project. So no implementation details. So here's some templates. Now each company has over time designed their own templates on how they capture these use cases. Here's just one of them, where at the very top you would have a very abbreviated name, typically a verb phrase, starting with a verb, right, and a very short, in a single sentence, and then in the description you would have maybe a couple of paragraphs describing, a little bit of context, right, of what this use cases is, and some of the preconditions that assumes the following steps. Perhaps you might say that the user already has an account, they've already logged in, maybe they're already looking at a particular product, right? They're looking at a particular product, and then the steps might be, well, they want to purchase the product, right? That's their goal. They want to purchase the product. So here you would have multiple steps saying exactly what the user does, right? They might the user selects how many they want, they add it to their shopping cart and whatnot, right? And then post conditions might be that a product is in the shopping cart, or they've left a review on the product or anything, right? And as they're stepping through the step, there might be different exceptions, right? As they're interacting with it, they might provide bad data. We need to document, how is that your system going to deal with all these exceptions. Again, this is another template where you might have multiple swim lanes. And each swim lane might have described the multiple users or actors that are involved in this, right? Either it could be a human actor, right? And on the other end, it could be the automated system that they're interacting with, right? And you might have, action and then reaction, and then action and then reaction between the two actors. Or you can have multiple actors, right? Depending on how complicated that use case is, right? Again, preconditions and then post conditions. Here's another template, much more verbose, where the use case might have an ID, right? And that ID typically is used in later aspects of the application, where you might maybe you create a story in Jira or some ticketing application, right? And then you would create perhaps a branch on your source control, right? And any you're based on this ID, and any source code that you write would be followed by this ID, right? So that we can do a whole track, right? The use cases all the way down to a single line of code that was written to support that particular use case, right? Anyway, so user story is a little bit high level, a little bit less granular, and might be supported by any number of actual use cases, several use cases that support a particular story. They might also have several canonical types of actors, perhaps even with names that have a particular description of that particular person, maybe their demographics, their age, their particular case. And as that person, you want to achieve a certain goal. Scenarios, different specific scenarios that are then abstracted into different use cases. So these would be documented in multiple types of documents that would go through a life cycle of being accepted and signed off on multiple folks that are the folks that are sponsoring the project, right? So here's just a quick overview of some of the use cases that you might have at different applications like Amazon. You might, certain things users might want to track their order. They might want to check the status, cancel an order, change their shipping, and typically they're captured in a verb phrase, right, where you have a verb and then the object of that verb. FreshBooks, that's an accounting firm that allows you to do online accounting. You can receive a payment, you can create an invoice, you can write an expense, you can create a new client, and so any new implementation, any new screens, any new buttons would support any one of these goals. Online purchase, add a shopping cart, search for a catalog, remove from shopping cart. And we would probably not capture or document any of the trivial ones, right? Things that are common to everybody. Everybody, typically we would not document the fact that you need to log in, right? The fact that you have to find maybe a PIN or a username or password. Those are trivial ones that usually are not documented. Here's an example of Fish 360. It's a phishing website. So a description of the system. It's a social networking site for professional fishermen that allows them to plan fishing trips based on various data. Fishermen can log in and they whatever they catch, their gear or their any fish that they catch, they can associate them with the trips and the location that they caught them, and they can also, well, this one doesn't go into, but they can also submit their data and to the NOAA, the National Oceanographic Association, where they can aggregate data from multiple fishermen and kind of measure the health of the ecosystem, right? Here's a couple of actors that you might find in Fish 360. The fisherman, maybe the sponsor, the end user. So the fisherman can, the kinds of things that they can do, they can plan fishing trips, they can take pictures, take notes on their trip, post their experience on the website. And sponsor, they can advertise on the website, they can rent boats, buy bait, get something to eat, etc. And here's the end user of the system. So here's a particular use case. So search for a location. Perhaps it has a canonical name, search location, perhaps even an ID that can be used to track this later on when you're actually implementing this. Short description: the fisherman enters the cities, towns, states, addresses, zips, searching for fishing information. Steps: the actor enters the location as a zip code. The system responds with a map, maybe a Google map. The fisherman selects a location, and the system displays details about that particular location. Maybe they if it's a Presumably, it's a place in the water. They might show the water temperature, the tide, the sun setting, when the moon comes out, whatever wind, any weather information would be displayed there. The fisherman confirms the selection and dismisses it and adds it as a trip. As a location. Then they might plan a trip. Fisherman selects a date, location, perhaps a location that's created earlier, right, when they were searching for a location. And then they might invite other participants if they want to go to this fishing trip. So here's a fisher, selects a location, the dates of the trip, and then the Fish 360 store the trip, make an entry on the calendar, and notifies any other users that this person is going on a trip, and those folks can then come back and either accept or they receive a notification, and they can either accept or reject the invitation to go there, and the Fish 360 then notifies of acceptance. So here's just a couple ones. So typically a use case, you would document it using this use case diagram, one of many UML diagrams that just as a visual representation, right, of all the lists of all the different things that you're going to be implementing from the point of view of the user. So the system is represented by this rectangular box, right? The actors are represented by these stick figures, and each one of the use cases is represented inside of that box. Right. So some of the use cases are particular to a particular actor. Some of them are shared amongst multiple actors, right? And some of them can be grouped into created into a hierarchy of use cases, right? Where they might be using other use cases, or they might be including other use cases, or assuming that to achieve that particular goal, you have to have achieved a previous goal, right? That they're dependent on each other. So here's just a couple of examples on a course management system. The different actors for that course management system. So the faculty, the course manager, the student are different actors, and all the use cases that go along with that. So a faculty might be able to create courses and create exams and assignments and quizzes and give grades, whereas a student, they'd be able to take the course, but they can't actually change assignments. They can't change these things. They're consumers of this content. So here's again some of the use cases that you might consider in this course management system. An ATM, here's another one: open account, withdraw, deposit, transfer, close an account. An example of withdrawing the cash, use case for that. Again, this is kind of taking the swim lane approach, where you have both of the actors here. One of them is a human actor, presumably, and the other one is a representing the actual system. Right. So anyway, so you'll be asked as a part of the first project assignment, right? You'll be asked to describe the system, come up with a UML class diagram, create identify use cases that you're going to implement. Ideally, what would happen is that you would then, in the functional requirements, you would start thinking about, okay, well, how do I actually associate a student took this quiz from this section, from this course that is being taught by this professor, right? So wow, that's a lot of nouns. Right? How are they related to one? Or how are they going to be? What kind of query am I going to be using? I'm going to need this particular set of tables, these relationships, and I'm going to need this particular insert or this particular update statement in SQL, right? And presumably it's going to be driven from this high-level design, from the requirements all the way down through the use cases and all the way down through functional requirements. Okay? Yeah, there shouldn't be any line of code that you ever write that is never written in the context of some use case, some functional requirement that are driven from some business, right? That we all agree is what we're going to be implementing. All right, let's